At this time, I hereby declare a quorum of the board is present and that we will proceed in the conducting of business. The matter this evening to be acted upon is the complaint filed against Commissioner Jim Higgins. Can y'all hear me? Yes. Good. Oh, good. Okay. On July 29th, 2014, the Ethics Board received an ethics complaint from Len Donato against Commissioner Higgins. In his complaint, Dr. Donato alleged that Commissioner Higgins violated several provisions of the Radnor Township Home Rule Charter and the Radnor Township Ethics Code as follows. One, that Commissioner Higgins violated the U.S. or Pennsylvania Constitution or other applicable law, that he failed to observe the highest standards of morality in discharging his duties as Township Commissioner, or failed to faithfully discharge his duties as Township Commissioner regardless of personal considerations, recognizing that the public interest must be his primary concern. Number two, that Commissioner Higgins breached the law or failed to adhere to the rules of work and performance as established as a standard for the position of Township Commissioner by the appropriate authority. More specifically, that Commissioner Higgins acted individually, seeking publicly or privately to direct the acts of Township officials and employees. The Ethics Board formally received the complaint because it satisfied the procedural requirements of the Township Code and the Board's rules and regulations. Receipt of this complaint initiated the Board's preliminary inquiry. Before I discuss the details of our inquiry, it's important to note that the limitations imposed on the Board and its members about what can and cannot be publicly disclosed. Section B2 of the Board's rules and regulations expressly states that the Board will keep information and proceedings relating to the preliminary inquiry and confidential. To allow for as much public disclosure as we can while complying with this rule, the Board developed a process where it discloses the extent of the inquiry but does not disclose the substance of the information. In completing our inquiry, we reviewed the complaint submitted by Dr. Donato. We interviewed Dr. Donato in the presence of his attorneys and reviewed documents submitted by him. The Board interviewed Commissioner Higgins in the presence of his attorney and reviewed documents submitted by Commissioner Higgins. We also submitted written questions to Radnor Township Police Superintendent, Bill Colarulo, and reviewed his substantive responses to those questions. In addition, the Board reviewed relevant documents provided by the superintendent. That was the extent of our preliminary inquiry, which we then discussed and came to the meeting here tonight. Next, we would have public comment, and that before receiving public comment, I'd like to inform you that we follow the rules set up by the Board of Commissioners, or the practice, I should say, of permitting people of the public to speak for approximately 5 minutes. And I, of course, reserve the right to shut off the podium microphone if the time limit is exceeded, or to adjourn if we are having a significant problem. At this time, I invite any public comment regarding this matter.
Good evening, Dan Sherry, Wayne. Just first a quick question. I see Mr. Barris is seated on the dais up here. Did the Board of Commissioners vote to appoint Mr. Barris for purposes of this investigation? It is my understanding that this board is comprised of 2 members of Radnor Township government, the president of the Board of Commissioners, Elaine Paul Schaefer, who I see here, as well as the solicitor, that is mandated by the charter and the code. The only times those individuals are not present is either if they have a recusal. Commissioner Schaefer did that with the Bill Spingler investigation, as did Solicitor Rice. It was mentioned that this complaint was received on July 29, 2014. I'd like to think that I watched the meetings fairly closely. Was there a specific vote taken by the Board of Commissioners to authorize Joel Barris to act as counsel in this matter?
I really am not sure and don't know, because I know he was appointed by the Board of Commissioners to serve when we were doing the complaint against Commissioner Spengler, but I'm not sure whether that appointment carried through or not. Do you know?
Something else about that appointment. Well,
I do know that I specifically asked the township manager if my appointment carried forward through subsequent complaints, and John Rice and the township manager both confirmed that they would like me to continue to act as counsel for the ethics board.
did John Rice recuse himself in this ethics board investigation of Jim Higgins?
I haven't spoken with him about that, so what I need to accept is what Joel said, which is that Solicitor Rice, asked him to continue, which as I recall when this matter came up, that he was specifically asked to do this. I'm not sure how that all worked, but it did happen.
I apologize
Go
for
ahead.
my
Go
terseness,
ahead.
but I don't
Well,
appear
just-
to be getting much of a response. Let me just, by way of the record.
Dan, why don't we let
The
him?
May 12th, 2014 meeting that appointed Mr. Barris to be counsel was for one commissioner. I looked at the video tonight. The reason why I know it was regarding one commissioner, and it was Bill Spengler, because the person introducing the motion was Jim Higgins. It was for the Spengler investigation. That's it. Any other investigation involving anybody else, it's got to be the township solicitor, unless he recuses. I still haven't heard that he has recused, and the board president. So can anybody now answer the very simple question whether John Rice recused? Because if he did not recuse, this board is convening in violation of Radnor's code and Radnor's charter, which mandates the Radnor solicitor be present.
If you'd like.
Sure.
John Rice felt that he was a potential fact witness in this matter, and therefore did not feel it was appropriate to advise the ethics board as its counsel.
Was that announced at a public meeting?
We did have a public meeting, as you know, to accept this complaint, and I'm sure at that meeting we introduced Mr. Barris as the solicitor for our counsel for our Radnor Ethics Board.
On July 29,
So everyone was
2014, there
aware of it from that meeting, and so it was publicly done, and you can certainly go back and review the tape of that meeting.
So the complaint against Mr. Higgins was the subject of a public meeting when it was first received by this board?
Correct.
Okay, that was televised?
I'm not sure. Was it televised? Do you remember? I don't remember. It might have, it probably was, but I don't remember.
Mr. Barris? Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay.
But it was publicly advertised. That we do know.
That you do know. Okay. Well, so we don't know whether or not John Rice is actually recused, but I'll just leave that lie. I will address that, I guess, in the future as to whether or not Mr. Barris was authorized by the Board of Commissioners to actually serve as counsel, and this township, by extension, paying a Reed Smith legal bill. Couple questions also regarding this process tonight and this preliminary inquiry, which became a rather significant issue involving the Bill Spengler investigation. As I understand it, and as I continue to understand it, the only way that a preliminary inquiry can be closed is if the actions at issue do not fall under the code, and if the person at issue does not fall under the code. That is specified specifically in Section B, the second Section B in this rather poorly worded document of internal protocols of the Ethics Board preliminary inquiry, which states the board, through its chairperson, will close the preliminary inquiry if, one, the occurrence giving rise to the complaint is not within the purview of the ethics code, and number two, the respondent is not a person subject to the ethics code. So I'm anticipating that there will be no closing of an investigation tonight, since clearly Jim Higgins and the alleged of conduct, as I've read it in the newspaper, would fall under both. Something else, though, that appears to have not been brought up when this meeting was discussed earlier tonight. What I had read in the paper, and I see Dr. Donato and his counsel there, and perhaps they can address it during public comment, is one of the real gravamen of the complaint that Dr. Donato had against Commissioner Higgins was trespassing. And I don't recall actually hearing trespassing when a litany of the charges was being read, Mr. Hirsch. Was in fact trespassing an issue that was part of the complaint?
The trespassing was an issue, and we did look into it, and that, that will be part of our considerations tonight.
Okay, because even though whatever you did behind closed doors has not been made public, and even though you are going to be apparently loath to talk about what you did, Commissioner Higgins has actually made some public representations about that trespassing issue. And to the extent that hasn't been discussed, figure I might as well read it. This is from
let me just caution you before you start that I do want to try to stick to the 5 minutes. I respect the fact that you came here well prepared and, and prepared to listen, but I'd appreciate if you would, stay on subject and move quickly if you can.
It's on subject. And bringing this up when I don't hear the word trespass when the charges are being laid out by the chairman makes me think that perhaps it does need to be focused on carefully. This is what Jim Higgins told the newspaper, and this is from the story, Radnor veterinarian files complaint against Radnor commissioner, Thursday, May 29, 2014. After Dr. Donato talks about specifics, Commissioner Higgins informs the press about whether he was there or not. Obviously, the complete defense to trespassing is, I was never there at all. But that's not what Commissioner Higgins says. This is what he says. It is not true that I went onto the hospital property as a trespasser. I did go to the hospital property with Dr. Donato's permission for the purpose of meeting with him and the residents. I supported Dr. Donato in his efforts for many months. He never once told me at any of our meetings that my involvement was unwanted. In order to be sure the residents were accurate in their claims that nothing had changed and the dogs were still a major nuisance to the neighborhood, I later went onto the property with his implied consent to see if any additional sound attenuation measures had been implemented. None had been. Now, that's relating specifically to trespassing. I would state, if you intend to go the same route you did with Bill Spengler in terms of the investigation and state no probable cause, if Dr. Donato is saying that Jim Higgins trespassed, and Jim Higgins is saying, oh yeah, I was there, but I had implied consent, which means that he didn't actually have words from Dr. Donato saying you may go to wherever he went, you're weighing the evidence, and that is within the purview of the Radnor Board of Commissioners. So I just thought that I would make that clear because that is in the public record.
Okay.
The last
Thank you.
thing that
I think you have your last point. Go ahead.
I will just make one more last point in terms of specific language in Radnor's charter. You talked about the U.S. Constitution, but there are some specific components of Radnor's charter that talks about how commissioners should conduct themselves. I'll just read a couple right here. As I understand it, with respect to directing police officers, there's a Radnor Charter section directly on point. That's 2.09H, or we'll say allegedly directing Radnor police officers. Administrative policy, it is the intent of this charter that the board act as a body in relation to all township matters. No commissioner acting individually shall seek publicly or privately to direct the acts of township officials and employees. That may have some relevance regarding police officers. Next, Radnor Code, section 39-2, responsibilities of public officers and employees. And again, I'm reading this because I don't recall them being specifically identified at the onset of this meeting, but they may have relevance to Dr. Donato's claims. Public officials and employees are agents of public purpose and hold office for the benefit of the public. They are bound to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and to carry out impartially the laws of the nation, state, and municipality, and thus to foster respect for all government. They are bound to observe in their official acts the highest standards of morality and to discharge faithfully the duties of office regardless of personal considerations, recognizing that the public interest must be their primary concern. Their conduct in both their official and private affairs should be above reproach. So official and private, and that's Radnor's Code. Last section. Radnor Code Section 39(3)B, dedicated service. Officials and employees shall under no circumstances exceed their authority or breach the law or ask others to do so, and they shall work in full cooperation with other public officials and employees where so directed by the appropriate township authority, unless prohibited from doing so by law or by officially recognized confidentiality of their work. Under no circumstances exceed their authority or breach the law. So, with that specific section of Radnor's Code, previous section of Radnor's Code and the section of the Charter, as well as the issue of trespassing being before this board, and my concern about Mr. Barris representing the Ethics Board in this matter, I'll yield.
Thank you very much. Is there any other further public comment?
Yes.
Good, please.
Good evening. I'm Len Donato, veterinarian and owner at Radnor Veterinary Hospital. At the beginning, I heard about me being able to provide documentation. I was asked to bring a few items with me, but I did not get to provide all of the documentation that I have, and I just want that to be known right off the bat. I was a little surprised that I heard that because I thought someone was going to ask about that at some point. So that's a little concerning to me. The second thing that I wanted to say with regards to the trespassing, that was a pretty important part of this, and I did not and would never tell someone that they can just walk into the back of my hospital when there are dangerous dogs. People can be bitten. Dogs can get loose with doors open. I would never just let somebody say, oh yeah, go ahead, it's fine. Because that would be one of the biggest ways for me to have a liability case. Dogs, we have dogs that are dangerous. We have strays that are brought by the township. We have pets that just don't like other people, and they will give them a good chomp, and I would never let that happen. I would never tell somebody to get into areas of my hospital where there's animals without somebody escorting them. So to say there was implied consent with the trespassing, that is not the case at all. With regards to one time that Jim Higgins interrupted an emergency that I had with a cat. He's literally interrupting my business and this animal's life. And that really got under my skin a bit, considering that he would have not liked that if that was his cat. And that's not good for the animal, and that's why I'm there. And for someone to interrupt that, that seems to go above what a commissioner should be doing. It goes above what anybody should be doing. And if it was your cats, I don't think you'd like that too much. I don't need to be distracted when I'm trying to help an animal. With, and there are a number of witnesses that were not talked to by the board here regarding that matter. So I think that should be something that's on the list of things to do here. We also have a number of witnesses that know that I told Jim Higgins to not enter the hospital without an appointment. And he even makes reference in an email about coming unannounced on purpose. The same people also know at my hospital that we told him to come back and make an appointment another time. He goes around to the runs, sees one of my employees taking a break out there, and tells them, according to what they said, that he said, I said it would be okay for Jim Higgins to walk back there. Can you take me back there? And then they did, because he said I said it was okay. These are behaviors that really are not becoming of a commissioner, and I feel they violate a lot of the code that is in there. Those are the main issues that we have, and none of my staff has been talked to. I've been able to provide documentation, and I'm concerned about those things as we move forward, because I feel like my employees should be heard, and I feel like I should be able to provide documentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments, and we'll go forward.
If I can make a point of clarification,
Sure.
just so the board members are clear, I think you know this. In our communications with Dr. Donato inviting him to speak with us, with the board, excuse me, he was specifically requested to provide any and all documents that he felt supported the allegations within the complaint. So this is the first time I'm hearing that he didn't have an opportunity to provide documents, and I've had several conversations with Dr. Donato's attorneys about that interview and about the process.
We had
Okay.
specific documents we were asked to bring, but not everything, so
Okay,
I'm happy
well-
to provide that.
Thank you. Thank you. We had an extensive meeting with you and your attorneys, and as we did with Commissioner Higgin and his attorneys, and all of these matters that are being brought up here tonight were considered by the Ethics Board when they were presented by the group. So there was really nothing new here about trespass, about other issues that we all put, we all had a chance to question you and your attorneys, so, we did the best we could.
Okay, I'd be happy
Okay,
to provide
thanks.
that documentation.
Okay,
then.
so thank you, Doctor. Are there any other public comments?
Good evening. It's nice to see you all again. My name is Kevin Demko. I'm one of Dr. Donato's attorneys in this matter. I'll be very brief in this. As Mr. Sherry laid out, there are only two grounds in which a preliminary inquiry can be closed. Number one, if the respondent is not subject to the code, which I believe is not up for debate. Commissioner Higgins is subject to the Radnor Code. And number two, the violation alleged are not against the code. Dr. Donato, through both his formal public comment tonight as well as the informal testimony he provided to the board, along with his complaint and other documentations, has laid out that Commissioner Higgins trespassed on his property, that Commissioner Higgins had directed Radnor Township police officers to issue citations under a noise ordinance. This has been the evidence that's presented. Assuming it's true, these are violations of the code that warrant a full investigation and formal report to the Board of Commissioners, which is honestly what the people of this township deserve, what Commissioner Higgins deserves, and what Dr. Donato deserves. If the evidence supports the claim after a full investigation, the residents of this township deserve to know what Commissioner Higgins has done and what evidence supports that. Conversely, if it does not, Commissioner Higgins deserves that type of public exoneration. It's process, it's procedural, but process matters. These are serious allegations, and if the citizens of Radnor Township are to have any faith in their government, they deserve a full hearing with a public report to the Board of Commissioners. When I was driving over, I was thinking back to one of the conversations I had with one of my poli-sci professors, and he was quizzing our class about, who was the president, the vice president, your congressman, and we were all seniors, so we knew that. But when he got to who were your town council members, who was your mayor, none of us knew. And he scolded us. He said, you need to know these people because they are the most important and most impactful in your life. They decide, can you get a pool in your backyard? Where's a stop sign going to go? Does a university get a zoning variance? How are codes interpreted? And because of how important and how impactful and how everything they do touches on the things that actually matter to you, when they violate the public trust, it's the most egregious thing that they can do. It's far worse than anything the President of the United States can do, far worse than anything a member of Congress can do directly to me as a person. And because of that, a full and fair investigation and report to the Board of Commissioners is warranted. We're not asking that you agree with our position. Right at this point, we believe after you conduct a full investigation, you will agree with us. But at this point, all we're asking is that you take the next step, which under your policies and procedures is warranted, and which under the investigation, should allow for. And it's quite honestly a full investigation and report that the township deserves and that all parties in this matter deserve. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think it might be helpful if Mr. Barris explains what the probable cause standard is that we have to adhere to, that the matter that we are voting on is the fact of whether there's probable cause that would go to an investigation. So would you mind just commenting on what the standard is that we apply? Because I think it's been misstated several times about what we do, and that we have this preliminary inquiry in order to determine whether there is probable cause, which would in turn bring us to an investigation.
Yep. Under the board's rules and regulations, the Ethics Board conducts a preliminary inquiry to determine whether or not there is probable cause. And if there is probable cause, then the Ethics Board moves on to hold a full investigation and a hearing, either public or private, depending on what the commissioner in this case would choose. If there is no probable cause, then there is no process to move forward and the preliminary inquiry is closed. The probable cause standard that we have been using here is it is more likely than not. So the question is, are the allegations more likely than not true or have occurred? And if so, there is probable cause to move forward.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Yes, quickly. Apologize for taking up any more of your time. Gentlemen and lady, how are you tonight?
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I am.
Sure.
Matt Metcalf on behalf of Len Donato. Relative to probable cause, something being more likely than not, I'd like to point out that the only sworn testimony that you have is Len Donato's complaint. Nothing else has occurred. You have oral testimony relative to a trespass, which is a violation of law. You have oral testimony on directing the actions of police officers, which is a violation of the township charter. This obviously comes within the purview of the Ethics Board. The respondent is obviously subject to the Ethics Code. As a member of Radnor Township, it would be hard to understand how a full investigation would not be opened, given the information that you have. And it would be hard to understand how we wouldn't be entitled, as Radnor Township citizens, to see this through. And so I would ask you to open a full investigation so we can decide whether or not the conduct of Mr. Higgins is appropriate. And I hope that you do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close the period for public comment and go to the next item on the agenda, which is the motions. At this time, I'll ask the members of the board if there are any related motions to entertain. Yes, Lane?
Yes, with respect to the charge that Commissioner Higgins violated Section 5-10 and 39-2 of the Radnor Township Code, I move that the preliminary inquiry be closed as there exists no probable cause that Commissioner Higgins violated these provisions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do any members wish to make any comments before we vote? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed to the motion, please say no. The ayes have carried unanimously, and the motion is carried. Are there any other related motions? Elaine?
Yes. With respect to the charge that Commissioner Higgins violated Section 39-3 of the Radnor Township Code, I move that the preliminary inquiry be closed as there exists no probable cause that Commissioner Higgins violated this provision.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion before the board and a second. Do any members wish to make any comments before the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have a brief comment regarding this motion. First, I'd like to preface my comments by reminding those here and those watching that this meeting represents the conclusion of the preliminary inquiry into the complaint against Commissioner Higgins, obviously. Our rules, as have been debated here, require that this phase be confidential, and I think everyone on the board believes that that is entirely appropriate. So therefore, those rules by definition will limit what I can say with regard to my vote this evening. This is the second complaint before this board. I believe all of us take our responsibilities in this matter and these matters very seriously. We discuss the issues thoroughly and consider all sides of the issue. Radnor citizens, as has been pointed out, do have the right to expect that their elected officials will conduct themselves in a manner consistent with that outlined in the Ethics Code 39.2, as Mr. Sherry read this evening. Simultaneously, citizens have a right to expect fair and equal treatment under all circumstances. This board would like to always have a unanimous decision when it comes to considering these issues, but that will not always be the case, and that is okay. Tonight will be one of those situations. I will not be voting for this motion. I do not want anyone to draw any conclusions from that with regard to my having concluded what happened or didn't happen here. It is strictly my opinion that this should go forward and we should get more information and hear more from both parties. Normally, that would prompt me to put forward another motion. And I would normally do that, but I do not believe there is support on the board for that, and so I will not do that, but I will not vote for this. I would just reiterate that, in my opinion, there is reason to believe that we should go forward, and certainly information that I did not receive that I would have liked to have received, and probably reason to believe that we should have heard more from some of the parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Are there any comments from any other board members regarding this motion? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed to the motion, please say no.
No.
The ayes have carried 4-1, and the motion is carried. Are there any other related motions? Hearing none or seeing none, I now move that we have the board's counsel draft a letter for our signatures to the complainant and to Commissioner Higgins, and that council copy the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners to notify them of the board's closing of the preliminary inquiry. I further move that the board's counsel cause the letter to be delivered after it has been signed by the board members. Is there a second to this motion?
I second the motion.
We have a motion before the board and a second. Is there any comment from any board members? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. The vote has carried unanimously, and the motion is carried. Are there any other items to be considered tonight? Hearing none and seeing none, I now declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.